Lunch already? Guys, let's get started. So I'm gonna be receiving three great friends of mine here. We're going to have a great talk. And the topic is actually being very widely discussed, which is the power of digital experiences in an increasingly connected customer journey. So let's invite the first panelist, Daniel Rosa, CIO of Sompo. He's been working with IT for 30 years. He's been working in different industries and is currently focused on insurance. Welcome. Our second panelist is Fábio Andrade. He is the Director of Data and Innovation at Rede. He has 25 years in the medical area in the biggest health company in Latin America. And finally, one of our greatest partners, Ronaldo França. He is insurance business development manager at AWS. He has 20 years of experience in innovation and digital transformation. Welcome, Ronaldo. Hello, guys. So let's get started. Here on the screen, soon enough, you are going to see a QR code. You can just point your camera to it and scan it to send your question. So the first question that I have is something that has been widely discussed. So nowadays, data is the base of everything, and we are always working on APIs, on integrations. So how do you currently use data analytics in your companies? How do you collect them? How do you treat them? How do you manage them? Danny, you go first. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So, data is a funny thing. When I started back 30 years ago, as you said, the area was called data processing. And if we stop and think about it, I mean, data has always been the source and the foundation of everything. You just cannot make any decisions nowadays if you don't stop and look at the data first. So, for example, at Sompo, we are always thinking about, how in insurance, when you're always talking about risk, how do you use data of what we don't see to help us with risk assessment? So, for example, everyone talks about policies, about endorsements, but the thing is, the insurances that I don't sell, they speak loudly, and we don't always look at it. So nowadays we are always trying to capture this data and understand why we didn't make the sale. And in terms of risk, we are always looking in the rearview mirror, but not always in the ones on the sides. And we have to include in all of this information with all this data to try and get to the right information. Okay, Fabinho. And now you were a person who has a lot of experience with analytics at SulAmérica and Rede. So what do you think about this open system? Hello, guys. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. Well, my industry is highly fragmented in terms of information. I always tell this story so everyone can understand how difficult it is to get data in the health department. So if you have ever participated on other panels, you have already heard this story. So how did this private health sector was born in Brazil? The first ICU just completed 50 years here in Brazil. So we are fairly young. So basically it all started back in the 40s. Basically we only had public hospitals. There were some doctors from wealthy families. They usually bought a building in their cities, and it started a hospital, and then it went from father to son, and so on and so forth. And what does it have to do with data? Everything. We have more than 1,000 hospitals with over 60 beds, and that's how I was raised. During our IPO, we actually found a document that was written by the Berkeley University, if I'm not mistaken. and it said that a hospital, in order to be profitable, has to have at least 150 beds, and that means that I have to be highly efficient when it comes to my supply chain, my negotiations, in purchasing. And in order to do so, I need information. But the problem is the hospital systems were made for that specific public, not for me as a network, a chain of hospitals. So, Rede, in order to get to where we are, it actually was born already data driven. So we already had this thought from the beginning. We needed information in order to grow. And one of the sponsors, I mean, Regidor is a familiar company, and we had a sponsor from our family in order to look at it as a business unit. And that was crucial for our success. The business area for Regidor was never seen as a technology area, but always a strategic area. Currently, all the decision making inside of our company is based, and I mean all of the decisions are made. We currently own 74 hospitals with 63 different databases. I would never be able to have a digital relationship with a customer or even be able to purchase medication in batches if we couldn't create our information technology. And that's what we did back then when we started the company. We are not very good at marketing. You will probably never see a lot of advertising about us, but our board understands that the data area is our biggest competitive advantage. Very well. So, Ronaldo, can you please talk about how AWS handles this issue nowadays? I mean, I know that you have a lot of different cases, so please walk us through it. Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation, and congratulations to Sensedia for organizing such an event. It's a pleasure to be here with you, teaching a class basically, and I'm here learning. And it's funny that Fábio mentioned the value of the data for the health sector. And I was thinking about it, and I believe that we have both industries, insurance and health, and they are both industries that have always dealt with data. And this fragmentation Fabio mentioned is something that I have been witnessing for the 20 years that I have working in insurance, and this is a pain point for us. In insurance companies in general, there are different business lines, and each one of them has a different and single database. And for years, we have been having this vision that was highly focused on the policy and not on the customer. And I always say that, I mean, saying that, okay, this is the theory, but actually it's true because systemically speaking, the way we were able to get organized and with the technologies that we had available back then, I mean, that was what we could do with what we had. And I can see this shift. And to talk a little bit about what we have been doing at AWS as an insurance, a health company, we were saying that this barrier no longer exists. We are able to have a single view of customers as a whole. And that's how, that's the importance of data for this segment. We can forecast the future based on the data. And we are able to see more and more anomalies based on the data that we have. So there is a higher and higher need to work preemptively based on the power of the data. And it is only going to work if you can integrate this data to have a single view of the customer and, of course, process that in a timely manner. And this is what we have been living now. There are many technologies available now that actually enables this type of interaction that may result in a way better experience for the customer. Okay, Ronaldo. Actually, all the panelists have something in common here. All of you have been through an M&A. And when we talk about data, of course, there are a lot of different systems involved. And it's actually funny to think, how am I going to handle this data? We talk about APIs and the whole thing, but how do we do that when we incorporate companies. How do we do that? Fabio, if you could please start. Sure. Well, just like Flecha said, I've been in this company for 25 years. I am the oldest employee of Rede. I have seen it all begin. I mean, when I joined the company, we only had one hospital. And this is how we grew through M&A. And it was a privilege to me, actually. One of the biggest learnings that I have always had, it was to acquire other hospitals. So the story of the company basically mixes with mine. Back in 2003, if I'm not mistaken, the current CEO of the company called me and said, Fabio, we are going to start buying hospitals. So we didn't have any money, we didn't have offices to work in evaluations or due diligence. Basically, it was just the two of us. So we went to the hospitals. I had a laptop on my arm. I just got all the information. I had a huge set of as is to be. So we could understand the mix of insurances and revenue to understand how much I would make when I started working with the suppliers. So we created a methodology of our own. And it's actually funny to say that because the company understands that very seriously. In this document that actually explains how this incorporation is made in terms of data is actually kept in the company safe. Because nowadays, currently, we are able to implement this structure in a hospital in 24 hours, and I'm not lying. Whoever works with us, they know that we acquire a hospital, and 24 hours later, the commercial area starts negotiating, and so does the procurement area. Just to give you an idea about the importance of data, we actually have a market metric that a hospital has an administrative cost of 15%. And at Regidor, it's 4. However, when we acquire new hospitals, this 15 runs down to 6% because that's when we start, of course, long-term negotiations, and that takes a little longer. But I mean, without information, we would never be able to do that. And it's something that's widely known in the company.
Talking a little bit about your experience, Daniel, we've always talked about this topic. I think you have a lot to contribute to this topic. It's interesting because I hear him talking about Hedgedor, and we see how important it is to look at the data to understand what you're buying, to know how to buy, and to be able to control and run the machine from the data. But our challenge at Sompo, other than running the data, and I don't know what's worse, right? In M&A, delivering the data or receiving the data. I am right now, the market knows, and an experience. I don't want to talk too much about that, but we do have a challenge of how we are going to handle that data. And you realize how much you've barely handled it from the past until now, and you start to have challenges with it when you start to receive data and where is it going. Talking a bit about data here in the sense as how do I use the data to understand my business and not only to run my business. To run the business, it's pretty obvious. We need to know how to do the math and understand. But a lot of the time, I had a teacher, a professor in university that would say, beat the data up and they'll tell you things you don't know. And I remember that because when you go into analytics, when you start looking at your data history, you start seeing amazing things that you never realized before. So I want to reduce costs. Oh, it's going to be so difficult. When you start looking at customer data, you understand how to reduce costs. So it's pretty interesting. And today, the biggest challenge that we're living at Sompo is specifically to Sompo is a company that works with insurances for 130 years. The company originated in Japan. So how do we get the entire data of 60 plus years that Sompo has been working in Brazil and study that data to understand the market? Does it make sense for me to look at data from 15 years ago to understand what's going on right now? Well, test it and you'll see that it does make sense. So that's my biggest message today, to really get the most out of the data so that we can get what we don't know. Yeah, and that's amazing because really brushing this data mining the data in a way, it's really difficult. It was a really difficult process. And today we don't have that barrier. Today it's more in terms of strategy. And still on that topic of data, a little bit of the reflection. AWS is a part of Amazon, and Amazon has some of these challenges, not specifically for M&A, but also for business generation, for business units. And I believe that the main factor that changed for that corporation was this view of becoming data driven and making decisions that were based on data. So this data for you to make a decision needs to be available. So the way that Amazon is organized and AWS does the same is that it allows for each business unit, each cell to act as a microservice. And I'll actually connect with the topic of this event. When we started getting organized and moving from a more centralized monolithical view, and we started working with microservices, this was only possible because we had data available. So each micro cell could make their own decisions from that. So this helps us in the evolution, just like in health, to absorb, process and increase the business, just like in insurance. So getting this work, looking at a history, or looking at an operation, and quickly being able to make it available or make it ready for operation itself, I see this as a great value of transformation in the market, and also this view of each one being able to consume the data and make decisions from that data. Amazing, Ronaldo. And more, the data is pulverized. Several topics, several databases. So when you think that you want to grab a unique data from a customer and you discover that they have different systems, how am I going to work with that? Like microservices that Ronaldo said, we have several integrations that you need to have a composition of the data to reach the result that you expect. We've been doing that a lot on Rede, on Sompo, and several other places. But going back a little bit to the user experience that we said at the beginning, how did you use technology to create or recreate the entire digital experience? So, what were the main challenges? I remember that at Rede, if you don't know, Rede was one of the first companies, if not the first, to allow you to schedule tests and also pick up test results. I remember we participated actively in this project with you, and it was a boom in the market. So they're saying, now I don't have to call a call center to schedule a test. I can go and pick up my results through a website and just not get them physically. I can just see them on the website. So I wanted to hear from you, what are the digital experience that you have with the final user? Okay. Well, the data is still present in that point. I'm going to talk about my case again. So you're not selling insurance. Why are you not selling? I don't know. I need to get the data to see why I'm not selling. And I'll stop talking about data in a second, guys. But when you look at the data, you'll see that it stops, the person stops at a certain spot in your website. How do you know? There's a data there. Google helps us with that. Regular Google, they go and they have statistics, but what kind of information were they putting on my website, and at that same point the person decided to exit the website? How do I capture this information? So we're going to connect with Sensedia. Probably I'll call an API that's going to store that data somewhere. So what you start to see is that the data can be anywhere in a quick and online way when you need it, without replication, without duplication, and you can use technologies such as API to control that. Talking a bit about experience, the experience is horrible because we come up on the stage and we say, I did this, that happened, everything was amazing. But those who implement know that it's actually very difficult. we don't turn it on and it works. It's not as simple as that. So today, the experience that we have, we're reviewing the Sompo architecture at the moment in terms of how do I traffic data quicker between systems without having to duplicate the data. Because when you duplicate, you start having data reconciliation. So data that's there, it doesn't match with the one that's here, or it didn't process correctly. So it's much better for you to process the data locally. And when someone needs it, they will make a call and they'll get the data, use it, and kind of give it back. Of course, depending on the technique, you need to duplicate or you don't, but usually that's what we're trying to do. So, as an experience, in the experience point of view, we want to get from that previous model where you would duplicate the data or take it from one database to the other, and then you would have huge terabytes of data. And in the end, if you kind of put it all together, it wouldn't even be 1 giga. But since you have so much duplicated data, you have huge amounts of space. And today, when we have a lot of data, they are unique, and we can use the API to retrieve that data. Okay, so how are we able to solve that on our side? One of our main pillars within the data sector is data governance. So we have a team. I have a few management areas that take care of that and that alone. So it's no longer, oh, I'm going to get the information from here and put it there, duplicate. No, you're not going to do that. So we have a lot of rules for that to happen. And what Rafa said is completely true. You can't, let's call it innovation without information. That's not possible. And talking a little bit about the cases that Rafael mentioned, it's good to talk about that because this was an excellent business for the company. Today, we have around 500,000 consultations a month, and 40% are scheduled on that channel. Talking about money specifically, a call center call, so if someone schedules on a call center, costs around 9 reais. An online schedule costs 70 cents. And for that to be possible, we created a very heavy information layer. One of the biggest challenges we had in that scenario was fragmented information. I'll give you an example from São Paulo. If a patient of mine would go to São Luís Itaim, a hospital, and they would go to Vila Nova Star, which is a different hospital, the system was completely different, so they would have to do it all over again. So we invested very heavily in the structure. In the sewer, let's say. And after you build everything, MDM, it's really important for us. So data governance needs to approve literally everything. And after you do that, it's not easy. You have to fight with everyone to make it happen. You need to have a very strong sponsor to make that happen. But after you do, the company can see the benefits. Because it's not just going to be money economy or you don't have the information. Because not having the information costs a lot. And saving the data in 3 different locations, it costs a lot, whether on cloud or locally, backup costs, security costs, all of that. That costs money. And we treated that in a way that was really based on governance. So we were able to make the 2 biggest deliveries of scheduling and results online. For people who have one clinic or one hospital, it's fine. You're going to go into the result database and that's it. But how do you do that? I said 63 different databases, but other than that, we have 10 different operational systems in different hospitals. So how do you do that? Even the data structure is completely different. It seems like it's something easy when we talk about information, but I have somewhere that the name of the patient is 40 positions and in the other it's 70 positions. So I have gender in different ways. Some places it's M and F, the other is 1 and 2. So everything that was put together to make it unique was done by data governance. So then we feed the API layer, the information management area, and it's much easier. In the case of Rede, we were able to have the entire information layer in the LGPD area to be able to really have the natural cycle of information from end to end. Well, it's really great to look specifically at the health area. It's a delicate subject. We're talking about lives. And for insurances as well, we have a relationship with a life or with an asset. And when we have a personal relationship, like how we are here, being human, we can read the signs and we presume something. So, Fabio, do you want more water? Because your water ran out. So, for the digital experience, a lot of the time it seems cold. But what I've seen specifically in this area of digital interaction, digital experiences, what technology can do to capture those signs. So it's what Daniel said. You can identify that the customer wants a specific product, and then at a certain moment, they just dropped off your website. What's going on? They're saying, they're telling you what's going on. There's an information there. And there's a lot of value in that. So when we look at the digital journey, focusing on customer experience, the potential that we have today of processing and capturing each one of these signs and turning them into insights, whether it's for an insurance company or a service provider, a health provider, having this proposition, and I'll go back to my first talk, it was preventive, and now you're more having a proposable type. So I would like for an insurance policy, they shouldn't, for an insurance company, they should avoid for the accident to happen and not having to pay for it. So maybe we're getting to that. If the market starts to consume and use the data in that way, looking at specifically the customer or the patient, I believe the benefit is going to be applied to the entire company and to the individuals. So I see this digital experience and data processing with a high value nowadays. Amazing. I was being a moderator in a roundtable earlier, and we were talking about legacy modernization. And we talked a lot about data, user experience, and the impact on the final user. So we saw what's the position that we have there. And you said, how old is Sompo? Yeah, 130 years in the market and 65 years in Brazil. So, yes, it's truly a different reality when we talk about user experience. And when we talk about user experience, one of the trends that everyone has been talking about, we did talk about it today as well. It actually on our main track, that's one of the topics that we heard on the keynote was about AI. When we had on the summit the top three, AI was the first. So what do you see in your segment in health and insurance? How will you use artificial intelligence for the experience of your final user? Well, Rafa, you can use artificial intelligence in everything. The question is it worth it? I'm a big tech enthusiast, but I was always cautious to use technology for what it can do and not because it's trendy. So, if we're talking about insurances, understanding why my customer is exiting in the middle of the website and not buying a policy, is that going to be helpful with AI? Maybe yes, maybe no. Now, if I understand my customer's behavior throughout their life with their policy and understanding if I can offer them a better or cheaper insurance, then yes, it can definitely help. It's not anything that humans can't do, but maybe humans don't have the capability, like AWS having millions and millions of data and putting it against the customer information, understanding what could happen. So you talked about the insurance policy, avoiding the risk, because today the insurance company says, well, go ahead, and if something happens, we'll pay for it. Sompo is already doing that. If you know a little bit more about the transportation insurance, we already have an action that based on data, I'll avoid for the stealing of the cargo. It's good for everyone because the delivery is on time. There, no one is stealing the cargo, I'm not gonna have to pay the sinister, and the customer is happy because they didn't lose, the cargo, the truck, and sometimes even the truck driver. So Sompo is already working on that. It's not a reality for everyone because most most of us are not a transporting company, but if you are, then that's the case. Talking about AI, the success of the things that I capture data tell me a lot. For me to understand my GWP, my costs, my incomes, but the data that I'm not capturing today, that data tells me a lot about my business than what I can imagine. So when I sell something to a customer and I make the offer and they buy it, I have all the purchasing data. But all the others that are not buying, why are they not buying? So when we talk about risk in an insurance company, okay, Daniel, but I'm talking about AI. Yes, we do that with humans, but the processing capability to process a huge amount. How many people do you think ask for an insurance and they don't go through with it? Let's give you a quick example. Each one of you that have a car, call your broker and say, I want to have an insurance on my car. They'll come back with 5 or 6 quotes and say, the best one is from Sompo, because I'm from Sompo. So, yes, the best one is from Sompo. So, when he says that, you ignore the other four. What did that other 4 or 5 do to understand why Sompo sold? They don't know, but why did they not sell? So the amount of proposals that are dropped daily on an insurance company the size of Sompo is around 4,000 quotes per day.
So I convert about 1,000 quotes a day. So I have 4,000 opportunities. So do you think that a person can look at it in one day and understand it? So that's where AI comes in. Another thing is when I try to focus on the behavior of the people, I'm trying to, of course, focus on the feeling of a person, and that's perfect. It's never going to be replaced. However, if a person is in a bad mood, the rejection rate will be higher. And how do I know that? Because I have beat up the data. And if that person is having a bad day, if the broker is having a bad day, if they fought with their wife, then of course their conversion rate is not going to be the same, and we don't have that problem with the AI. So yes, sometimes we think, okay, is AI going to replace the human work? Not, but it's definitely going to help us out with the processing capability. So AI, yes, comes to helps us with data connection and AI to show us what we don't see, and to bring, of course, in artificial intelligence for what we cannot see with our own eyes. Yes, well, I am not always, wondering about new technologies. And I mean, to me, it's not it's not that intelligent, and even less artificial. So the name is not as sexy, but we have statistics. And what changed? Well, we have algorithms working for 50 years. What changed? The computational capabilities. So in the old days, we used to had to purchase 700 processors in order to be able to do that. And nowadays, we can do that in just a few hours, you know? And that's the difference. So, what are we doing now? And again, we need to know how to use the information in the best way possible. Let me tell you two cases, two quick cases. Um, I'm going to talk about two parts of it. We have a segment inside of our company that's called nurse browsers. I am a general hospital. I attend over 10,000 people a year. And one patient needs to have an ultrasound made, a mammogram, and the mass of the mammogram goes from 1 to 6. It's called B radius. Women are probably more familiar with that. And this B radius, 1 is a benign mass, 2 the same, the 3 is a little more concerning, the 4 is 30% chance of being a tumor, and the other has for mastectomy. So this information is all loose in the system. So we generated an algorithm in order to track all the reports, and whenever we find this type of anomaly, we actually already make the referral for this person to an oncologist and so on and so forth. Just to give you an idea, 60,000 people were treated for breast cancer in Brazil alone last year. This is the information that we have from the health ministry. And we found out that in 1 year, 5,000 people had B rates 4 and 5 that were just, lost in the system. And this is a very interesting data because since we changed this process, and I'm not talking only about data here, but my biopsy time was in 26 days. So a person had this mammogram, and there was this time for the doctor to look at it and to understand how to work with that. So we are now reducing this time for 48 hours. And in the case of cancer, it definitely makes a huge difference for the patient. And now, leaving AI, but inside the same realm, there is a disease which is heart failure, and it's the huge absence cause in Brazil is actually the biggest death cause. So heart failure is when the heart cannot pump enough oxygen for the body. So there are three types of heart failure. The serious case, which is when the person cannot even go up a flight of stairs, and this person is always experiencing some shortness of breath, and this is the moderate case, and the light case, the person basically lives normally. And sometimes it happens that the person arrives at the hospital and needs to have an appendectomy, and then of course we run some tests, and during these tests we see that this person has a heart failure. Of course, this person can undergo the surgery and all the things. But then we receive this data. The patient came in for one problem and went with the other one because we found this number. We could see that that person has a light heart failure, so this person needs to have an appointment with the cardiologist, with the doctor for cholesterol. We need to follow up this patient. And this is something that we cannot see with AI, but it's something that we can see with the data. And of course, there's another case which is a little bit more Star Trek, let's call it, because it's very futuristic. A little while ago, we started a process in the hospital that whenever the patient arrives at the hospital for an eye appointment, of course, we can do a whole mapping and see if the patient has diabetes or many other diseases, and that only from a photograph of the background of the eye. And of course, this is something that cannot be born without metrics. We do that with a goal in mind. And this is something that is currently measured in order, of course, for us to prevent waste of money and waste of time. So when I was talking about the nurse browser, of course, there is AI, but there is also analysis, description. It doesn't involve any algorithm or anything like that. Okay, very fine. Well, the guy has basically said it all. There's not much left to say. But the only comment that I have is that it's very, very interesting to listen to the specific cases of problems and how to get out of information and analyzing the operational efficiency. Not, just thinking about the hype of AI or language or a conversation with the AI. I mean, there are other cases that we are always seeing in insurance. Maybe they are more trivial, more subtle, but it's about the processing of physical documents. I mean, there's a huge volume of physical documents for any operation, and to have humans to do that, I mean, it's a work that brings no value to the business whatsoever. So the AI put to work in order to take these people from these activities and bring the humans to other activities that actually add value is something that can be very transformative. Currently, the majority of the processing and management of these documents is performed by artificial intelligence. And in terms of health and other health insurances and other insurances. I mean, to have the distinction that, okay, this is a medical report and it shows the pathology, and then bring that as an insight for the analyst. So basically, to highlight to them that this one requires a different treatment. This one needs to be discussed with a whole board of doctors. So there are some insights that can contribute and that are given by artificial intelligence. So, for example, there is an example from another insurance that actually applied filling analysis from calls. So they open claims, and sometimes the person just has a simple just have a the person just has a simple question that can be answered by the chatbot. But there are people that are currently in danger, and nowadays the volume of calls is quite high. So how do I know if a person can be can negotiate with a chatbot or someone who actually needs to talk to another person? So we have AI to make this analysis. There are cases of some insurance companies that already do that. Yeah, let me actually do a spin-off question right here. How do you see the regulation of AI algorithm? Well, I think we are still in the very early stages to start thinking about that. I mean, there's a huge technology capacity here today. Let me give you an example. There are some softwares that we see in the market that you just ask the system a question and they answer based on ChatGPT. So you see that there's a huge potential in terms of technology. However, in terms of regulation, we are just way in the beginning. We still have to discuss ethics before. Yes, I don't know if you have seen the news today, but Bing is actually using ChatGPT in a new version, and this doctor worked in the council for sexual harassment of another doctor. So ChatGPT had a bug. So whenever you search for this doctor's name, it it actually showed like he was the abuser, the one being processed. So now he's suing Microsoft. And this is just an example. I mean, what I mean is, think about how serious this is. And this is a case, a serious and real case. We have the NHS from England, and there is eye cancer detection. Usually, it occurs in kids only. And one kid went through the algorithm. It didn't detect the disease, and this kid ended up dying. The family sued everyone, and there is no regulation. So the judges don't know how to judge that. How can they measure that? So the judge said, okay, the startup doesn't have enough money to do that. The doctors, I mean, they have limited funds. So I am going to penalize the hospital. So he charged a year of profit, 60 million pounds for the family. That's how much it costed. So specifically about my segment right now, and forgetting about Sul America. But my problem is, as a hospital, as a health company, I cannot act irrationally. As an insurance company, maybe I can do that. I cannot pay a policy and nothing is going to happen. You know? Yeah, nobody's going to die because of that, because I don't pay a policy. But as a hospital, I cannot be irrational because I'll kill someone. So just to close this off, I mean, I remember when we started talking about AI back in the company, it was a little before the pandemic. Every week, someone came to us to try and sell some algorithm for the detection of pneumothorax in an X-ray. And I mean, I'm not even a doctor, and I can find that. But I mean, they were always asking, who's the doctor? Who's the one who signs this off? And I mean, I heard all types of excuses, and for health, I mean, it's crucial because there's a technical issue in order to sign something off like that. For Redditor, we actually have a doctor council that makes these decisions. We don't always think about all the math. Yes, actually, I read about a lot of people who were self medicating, by reading the information from ChatGPT, saying, "Okay, I have a headache," and then the browser returned with a medication, and people were self-medicating. This is actually very concerning. Guys, I actually have a question here. We received many questions actually, but we received one specifically that says, from the point of view of architecture, the use of platforms like data link may be a solution to centralize data that may be consumed or updated when we talk about synchronous or asynchronous through APIs. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? So, from the point of view of architecture, the use of data lake or platforms may be a solution to update data that may be consumed or updated through APIs. Okay, data lake. It's not exactly a platform, it's more of a technique. So, yes, the answer is yes. However, we have to take case by case. So again, let me give you an example. At Sompo, we have been capturing data about the failures so we can understand why. And you can, of course, leave that all on a structure called data lake or data house or whatever it is. But basically, it's a bucket of data. And for specific studies or specific information, you can break it down into data lakes and say, okay, this is a data lake for a specific issue. And then you can have a data replication. So, for example, in policies, I may have someone studying some statistics, and I can bring a specific data lake for this person and say, okay, this is the process that you need. Another person may need to test an AI for rigid or, and then I can create another data lake replicating data from other source. So yes, it is a technique. Yes, it does work. And how do we use API there? I don't want to interfere with the system operation in order to capture this information all the time. So for each milestone, there is an API saying, okay, save that. I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but save that, please. Do you save everything? No, not everything, but we try to save everything. So this is a technique that we use. You basically have a huge bucket, and then you can create different data lakes from that bucket in order to limitate the amount of data and the possibilities of the samples. Well, our strategy is basically the same because of the scenario that I just told you. I mean, about the fragmentation of information, 70 different hospitals. We created an architecture based on three pillars: a streaming layer, an orchestrator in the middle, and a lake by the end of the way. So why is it like that? In the past, we had that idea that everybody tried, to create an innovation hub, to have a startup working with us, and of course, that didn't work for anybody. It wasn't profitable at all for anybody. So we tried to create this hub, and the thing was, okay, maybe a startup could come to me and say, okay, I can take a sample from a nose hair and see if this person has cancer. Maybe we were talking about a month to get the results, so we just created this structure with this streamer, orchestrator, and lake. So whenever I need an integration, I make this integration directly with the lake that is updated real time with all the information from the patient, and also, of course, having its governance, data governance. So because we have separated databases, I have separated South America and South America that is with us. So it is also orchestrated to be delivered at a golden standard to my lake. So I had a drastic change, which is about the integration of the code in a formal way. So we have a formal code inside of the company, and the IT and integration projects areas are responsible for that. And with this new architecture, I mean, we saw a huge difference in terms of implementing new systems.
Yes, data governance is a very important point here. Daniel talked about the lake. The lake is a repository, and the APIs are how you're going to bring the data, how you're going to interact, but that doesn't do anything if you don't have data governance to get here as well as to consume and visualize. So I completely agree with what you two said. Just to talk about something else, if you're thinking of something in that sense, we also had the opposite path because the data would come in really wrong on my final system. So we are acting at the source. We call the supplier and we say, hey, I need you to validate this. When they put their information, your system needs to validate this with a broker. So in the case of Regidor, that's exactly it. I put their ID and I go to the broker and I bring the validated information. So we do that all the time. With an email, we do that with safety mail. So in that way, I can severely reduce my headcount in data quality because I'm fixing the problem right at the source. Hashtag just a tip. Do not solve your data along the way. It's always on the source. It's more expensive just for the first time, but that's it. Guys, we're reaching the end. I would like to ask a final question for you. There are several companies here today. It's a record number at APIX. So I want what's your main advice for someone who's starting the digital journey? Because every company needs to be digital. If they're not yet, they are going to be. So what would you say to someone who said, "Well, I don't know where to start"? Start with your customers, start understanding the customer. If you don't understand the customer, you're not going to have a digital experience. And I'm not talking about UX or CX. I'm talking about understanding the customer, getting the data, understanding the customer's needs, what they're showing you, and then you'll supply a good experience. We usually want to talk about good customer experience, being customer centric, and then we want to have a beautiful website and how you can navigate latest technology, gamification. Yes, this is important. It's part of it, but that's not all. We need to understand what the customer actually needs. The companies that are becoming digital, they are much more than a new technology plugged with APIs. The API is a means to an end. The technology is a means to an end. It's important for you to understand what your customers need and giving it to them without them asking. For the insurance market, that's what we're trying to do. Looking at the customer and saying, well, you need this. Did you realize because of this, this, and this? So this is data, technology, customer experience, and digitalization. Well, to simplify, being pragmatic, humble, and ROI. You can't start anything if you don't think about what you're going to pay back to someone who is creating the solution. So you need to understand what's going on and you need to be really practical. That's it. Well, I'm going to use a quote from our CEO at Amazon, Andy Jassy, and he says that there's no compression algorithm for experience. So it's what Daniel said, focusing on the customer, surrounded by KPIs and KPI driven, looking at the experience, making sure that at the end of the day, whether it's digital, if it's face to face, really taking care of the customer experience. Great. I would like to thank you all for coming. Thank you, Ronaldo, Fabinho, and Daniel. Great friends that I found through life. It's always great to chat with you, whether it's here or at a bar. It was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.